Alhamdulillah, it's been amazing this year so far.
And stuff, and you feel the holiday even if you're not celebrating it.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. My dear brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum
assalam. It's a blessing and honor to be among you once again. As you all know, in the middle of the month of Shahr Ramadan, we celebrate the birth of Imam Al-Hasan alayhi salam. The first candle, as we say, to illuminate the house of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen and Sayyidatul Nisa. So when we think of Imam Al-Hasan, what usually comes to mind, Yunus? Like usually when somebody talks about Imam Hasan, what are some things or some highlights that you think of when we talk about the Imam?
So usually to my mind, three ideas come. The first is the role that he played within the household of the Prophet. The second is his generosity. He used to split his wealth between himself and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the third is his treaty, which there's a lot of discussion about. A lot of discussion amongst historians, different points of view. Some haven't been able to make sense of it. Some have been able to. Some have,
Ahsant. I agree with you. When most people, Sunnah and Shia alike, and even Orientalists, non-Muslim scholars, analyze the life of Imam Hasan or the period of his imamah, that those 10 years, the highlight event is the treaty of Imam Hasan. And like you said, most people have not been able to put their heads around it and really understand the reasons for it. So maybe we should talk about that today.
The treaty about the Imam, inshallah.
So let me ask you, Brother Yunus, what do you think the common understanding of the treaty of Imam Hasan? What are the causes for it? Why did Imam Hasan alayhi salam perform a treaty with such an evil person like Muawiyah? What comes to your mind as an average Shi'i person?
So usually the idea that's given about the treaty is that it was the situation forced it upon the Imam, because they say that many of the Imam's companions had either turned their backs on him after the martyrdom of his father Imam Ali alayhi salam, or the excuse that's given is that they were too tired to fight. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is that, given the situation, Imam Al-Hasan alayhi salam wanted to expose Muawiyah. And had not been this way, he would have done what Imam Al-Hussein did and rose out to war.
Do you agree with him?
Yeah.
That's pretty much the popular opinion.
Yeah, that's pretty much what.
So to summarize, what Brother Yunus is saying, Imam Hasan was forced to do a treaty with Muawiyah, and the reason why he was forced is because he couldn't rely on his own companions, his own followers.
Or they were tired.
And if we're nice about it, we try to say, they were tired.
Because 3 civil wars in his father's time.
So that's and not all. That's a very minority of scholars, historians will indicate what you say. The majority will blame it. The full blame is on Ahl al-Kufa. And why? Because their main characteristic was betrayal. No loyalty, right? They had no loyalty to Imam Hasan, and Imam Hasan could not depend on them to fight Ahl Sham. So he had no choice.
So the majority blame Ahl Kufa.
Yeah, and even to a step further, it's very clear in a lot of history books, reports indicate that Ahl Kufa attempted to assassinate him. Right, and this is very common opinion.
Yeah, and they stabbed even in the show Mukhtar al-Thaqafi.
They stabbed him in his upper thigh, right? And in the city of Madain, and some history books, Imam Hasan after that event, it's claimed that he basically, I'm paraphrasing, that he seeks refuge in Muawiyah from these people. That's how bad the situation was. And we'll talk about Ahl Kufa a bit later, but this seems to be a common theme, that their main characteristic is disloyalty, right? Betrayal. All right, and so that's the common opinion. And I think if we talk to the average Shi'i and the average Sunni, if they have done any reading or they attend the mosques and listen to speeches, this is the understanding they have.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
And really the issue is, do you guys think this is okay?
I mean, for me, I've always struggled with it.
Do you think there's any problems with it?
Yeah, I do think there's serious problems with
Sheikh
it.
Hadi, what do you think?
Hatta like for example, usually and within our communities, we know that hadith that one imam sits while the other one stands. Even when you say he sits, there's like this kind of notion to it that the imam was weaker than Imam Al-Hasan.
When I was growing up and talking to an average young Shia who, whatever they know is whatever, they were taught, if they listen to speeches, but the common understanding is that Imam Hussein alayhi salam is known for his bravery.
Yeah.
He's courageous.
Yeah, Hasan.
Right? He stood up, he fought. Imam Hassan, there's usually awkward silence. And this is a big problem.
He's like Imam Ma'soom. He's immaculate.
His leadership, we just stripped everything away from his leadership. What did he accomplish? The only thing that we can come out, if we take the common opinion, is that he accomplished exposing Muawiyah.
But even with that, honestly, there's an issue. The issue with that is we're supposing that by exposing Muawiyah to his people, to Ahl al-Sham, to the like. So we have two people, right? We have Ahl al-Sham, the people of Syria at the time, because we know that after Prophet Muhammad was martyred, after that there were futuhat, there were conquests, and the Muslim empire expanded a lot, correct?
Big time.
Yeah, so two big arms of the empire. To the right was
to the right was Ahl
al-Iraq and Persia
Empire,
yeah.
And to the left, which was to the west, would be Ahl al-Sham.
The old
Byzantine Empire or the Eastern Roman Empire.
Yeah. So if Muawiyah was ruling that part, right?
Yeah.
So if Imam al-Hasan's goal was to expose Muawiyah, right? Who was he gonna expose them to? To two people, either Ahl al-Iraq, who already know the Ahl al-Bayt because Imam Ali is there, or so there's no point, he's not exposing,
yeah.
Or to Ahl al-Sham.
Good point, because
Ahl al-Sham don't know the Ahl al-Bayt.
And
they don't. So wouldn't do anything.
Good point. A few years prior to that was the Battle of Siffin, where Ahl al-Iraq fought with Ahl al-Sham against Muawiyah, one of the biggest battles in Islamic history. So I agree with you. He's not going to expose much to Ahl al-Iraq. They already believe that he's an evil person, right?
Yeah.
And as for Ahl al-Sham, they, their belief in Muawiyah, they have a very special relationship with Muawiyah because they were raised by Muawiyah. He was their spiritual leader. For many, many years, many generations were raised and they were taught Islam under the command of Muawiyah.
They were taught the Prophet's...
For all they know, he represents the Prophet, right? For all they know, that's the Prophet.
So then going back to the reason for the treaty, what's the problems? One, the exposing Muawiyah, there's questions about it, right? But I think really, if we look at the common opinion, understanding, was founded upon narrations that exist in the eldest, Islamic history books, right? When we look at those same history books, the same level of authenticity of reports that the popular opinion has founded their opinion on, we find that there's reports that contradict those.
In the same books.
The same books at the same level of authenticity. And a lot of reports.
When we say contradicts,
but for some reason they were kind of ignored. Okay, and we'll get into that maybe in another discussion.
When we say contradicts, Sheikhna,
let me give you some examples. So what we were speaking earlier is that Ahl al-Kufa were people that Imam Hassan could not rely on because they had no loyalty to him.
Betrayal.
And they attacked him.
And also that Muawiyah broke the treaty right away. Yeah, and that's how Imam Hassan exposed him, right? And how did he break the treaty? One of them, either by cursing Imam Ali alayhi salam on the manabir, or killing and terrorizing and imprisoning the Shia, the followers of Imam Ali alayhi salam, right? Many other aspects. Let's look at some samples, because to go into detail, we would need to open up the books. But for example, as for cursing Imam Ali on the manabir, when we look into historical reports, we see a contradiction because there's many historical reports that indicate Muawiyah did not begin cursing Imam Ali alayhi salam on the manabir until after the death of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, the father of Umar ibn Sa'd. And there's a famous story in the history books And basically he protested the idea, and Imam Hassan, Muawiyah la'anullah, was forced to refrain from cursing Imam Ali while Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas was present, because he protested the idea. And that Muawiyah did not begin cursing Imam Ali on the Manabir until after the death of Sa'ad. Well, when did Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas die? Months after the death of Imam Hassan. So that's after the year 51.
Not in the 10 years.
Okay, that's one. As for Ahlul Kufa's loyalty, well, how does Muawiyah, and let me give you an example. The third or fourth year after Muawiyah had, after the treaty, and he's the Khalifa of all the territories of all the lands, he goes and performs Hajj, and after Hajj he goes to Medina. Okay? And in Medina, he's there for 3 days. On the third day, he's sitting in his majlis, people are visiting him, his entourage, and there's a man named Abdullah bin Zubair sitting right next to him. And he's not known as somebody who loves it.
Yeah, of course.
Especially Imam Ali.
Right?
Yeah, so his father died in the battle against Imam Ali, to summarize it. So Abdullah bin Zubair is sitting by Muawiyah. Muawiyah asks him, or tells him, I'm paraphrasing here, he says, is it not strange to you that I've been here for 3 days? Me, the Khalifa. And everybody's visited me except for Al-Hasan ibn Ali. He still hasn't come to visit me. What do you think about it? Abdullah ibn Zubair looks at him, tells him, leave Al-Hasan, leave this subject. Don't even try to open it up. We all know that you and him are doing mujamala, okay? And you guys are forced to basically respect each other. And then Abdullah ibn Zubair, he continues by saying that the loyalty, that he says that if Al-Hasan wanted to strike you with 100,000 swords, he could do so.
He's capable.
And then he adds to it. He says, we're trying to the description of Ahl al-Iraq and their relationship with Imam Hassan. Their loyalty to Al-Hasan is they are more attached to Al-Hasan than a newborn camel is to its mother.
Wow.
Right? And this is a metaphor used in those times because a newborn camel follows its mother everywhere.
Yes.
Okay, that's just one example. We have many more. Or the conversation between the daughter of Uthman in the same year with Muawiyah, where he passes by the house of Uthman in Medina, and I'm paraphrasing here too because this is a page long narration, but basically she bashes on him that, you hypocrite, you rose to power, your campaign was built upon the idea of seeking vengeance for my father's assassination, and you put the blame on Ahl al-Kufa and the companions of Ali. But what's going on now? So they're free and they're safe and they're living comfortably and they're actually financially comfortably. Muawiyah had specified part of the conditions, and there was a certain amount of financial salary, we can say, to those companions. So what's going on, oh Muawiyah? What happened to your campaign slogan? And he tells her nicely, look, sister, here, cousin, we've promised them certain things and they've promised us certain things. He's describing the treaty. If I was to break any of the conditions, they would revolt against us. At that point, everybody, I know my Shia and Hassan knows his Shia. I know my followers and Hassan knows his followers. If things went down, I don't know if the result of the matter would be for us or against us.
Really?
Wow.
So it's better for you to sit as you are and respect it as the daughter of Uthman. Rather, if things went sour, you wouldn't be so comfortable. And he basically kept her quiet that way.
So this indicates the strength.
The strength. And Muawiyah is
around the Imam.
Muawiyah has to.
And the loyalty.
Muawiyah has to abide by the treaty, by the conditions. Here's a better one. Let me hit you with this one. We've all heard of this cursed man named Ziyad.
Yes.
Okay, we always think of Ubaydillah ibn Ziyad or Ibn Ziyad.
The one who...
So Ziyad ibn Abi or Ziyad ibn Sumayya, there's many titles for this cursed man. So this man, he was a very important personality for Muawiyah's government. And Ziyad, during the years of the treaty, he attempted to arrest one of Imam Hassan's companions in Basra. Okay? And what happens is the guy got away and he reports the news to Imam Hassan that, Muawiyah's forces are trying to arrest me. What's going on? So Imam Hassan nicely sends a letter to Ziyad. Listen, brother, not brother, he says, listen here, Ziyad, we have a treaty and I would like if you leave my companion alone. Very nice, simple message. Ziyad responds back in a very disrespectful way to Imam Hassan. And he expresses his hate and all that, but we're going to fast forward to the main point here. Imam Hassan looks at the letter from Ziyad. It looks like he doesn't want to abide by the conditions. What does Imam Hassan do? He forwards it to Muawiyah. This is why your guy, this is how your guy's acting.
Put your man in check.
So Muawiyah reads the letter and he's furious. With who? With Ziyad. And he sends Ziyad a letter. And he basically threatens him that if you get near any of Al-Hasan's people, there will not be a place on this planet that you can hide from my wrath.
Wow.
And who is he threatening? He's threatening a man that he refers to as his own brother, as Ibn Abi Sufyan.
Orphan children, youth, and their widowed mothers are suffering loss and poverty. Help us provide them with access to critical physical and mental health services, as well as vocational training opportunities through the Luminous Stars Centers. 3 centers are already opened and serving thousands. For those who are awaiting access to critical services, 12 more centers across different provinces in Iraq will give many more an opportunity to survive through the darkness. Heal hidden wounds, build futures, save lives.
And I mean, when we corroborate this narration with the other 2 that you mentioned, it's clear that the fear is because of the loyalty of the Shia and of the Kufans to Imam Al-Hasan alayhi salam.
Muawiyah was forced to abide by this treaty, and now the question arises that, okay, if Imam Hassan had so much strength, well, why did he do a treaty with Muawiyah? What was he going? What was he going to?
What was the objective?
Ahsan. So if we're looking at it in our eyes, we think of politics as gaining power and taking over territories and ruling over people, then it doesn't really make much sense, right? Because if we're looking at a political leader, but what kind of leader is Imam Al-Hasan alayhi salam?
Divine guide.
Right? I said he's a leader of guidance. His job is to guide people. His job isn't to be the so-called ruler and that nice stuff. His job is guidance. So if we look at it from that lens, we're going to look at things differently. So that will bring us to a different way of looking, a different understanding of Imam Hassan's treaty with Muawiyah. Okay? So now what could potentially be the reasons why Imam Hassan performed a treaty with Muawiyah? If we look at the common opinion and reports by people like Ibn Athir, he says that قِيلَ لِلْحَسَنِ مَا حَمَلَكَ عَلَى مَا فَعَلْتَ. Why did you do what you did, referring to the treaty? It was Hassan was asked, why did you do the treaty? Basically, he قال كرهت الدنيا ورأيت أهل الكوفة قوما لا يثق بهم أحد إلا غلب. So I hated this world, and he's just complaining, and he's straight negativity, and I saw that the people of Kufa are people that if you rely on or you depend on, you will lose. Okay, so what's the blame on Ahl Kufa? That's the popular opinion. Now let's go to a narration in Ilal al-Sharaya by Shaykh al-Saduq. He narrates it, a narration by Abu Sa'id Aqisa, who's known by, the Kutub of Rijal for Ahl Sunnah describe him as Ashad al-Rawafid. So this Shi'i, he's a hardcore Shi'i. He asks Imam al-Hasan, why did you perform a treaty with Muawiyah? Imam al-Hasan responds, he says, علة مصالحتي لمعاوية علة مصالحة النبي لبني ضمرة وبني أشجع ولأهل مكة حين انصرف من الحديبية. أولئك كفار بالتنزيل ومعاوية وأصحابه كفار بالتأويل. So this tells us this is a whole new way of looking at things. Imam Hassan basically is saying the reason for my treaty with Muawiyah is the same exact reason for the Prophet's treaty in Hudaybiyah with Ahl Mecca. Okay, the only difference is that they, referring to Quraysh in the treaty of Hudaybiyah, are kuffar openly, while Muawiyah and his companions are kuffar interface.
It's interesting that you mentioned Tanzil and Ta'wil. I've actually been listening to an interesting, very beneficial series on Imam Ali alayhi salam's life. And that distinction, that the role of the Prophet was bringing the message, was teaching the people the message, was transforming the community. And the goal of the Ahlul Bayt is the ta'wil, to preserve the meaning and the sunnah of the Prophet, to preserve the sunnah of the Prophet, the message of the Prophet.
So now, I sent him, good point. But now when we go back to the narration where Imam Hassan now is describing the treaty, and he tells, if you want to know the answer, you have to go back to the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. So when we, to paraphrase and summarize, to go deep into the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, we have courses that we're working on. Inshallah, they'll be announced soon.
With the Knowledge Seekers platform?
So just follow up with the Knowledge Seekers page and look for the announcement.
A full course?
Full of details.
Okay.
All right? But now I'm just going to summarize and condense things. So the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, why did it occur? The Treaty of Hudaybiyah occurred because when we look at the events before, and then we look at the events after, it becomes very clear. What happened before the Treaty of Hudaybiyah? What were the encounters between Quraysh and the Muslims? Badr, Uhud, Khandaq. Then we have Hudaybiyah, the treaty, and then we have Fatah Mecca. So when we look at Badr, Uhud, and Khandaq, we see that the conclusion, or what the result of these three battles, isolated Islam in the city of Medina and did not allow the Arabs, the majority of the Arabs, to have access to the truth of what this message is really about.
And these were when the Muslims were weak, and these wars were forced upon them.
Up to the year 6, right? Because the Battle of Khandaq is in the year 5, and the Treaty of Hudaybiyah is the year 6. So up to after Hijrah. So the result of these battles, without looking at who won or lost, the result of the battles is that the Prophet's mission was isolated and stuck in the city of Medina. There was a blockade due to the propaganda. Okay, the propaganda of Abu Sufyan and Quraysh. They were able to blockade Islam in the city of Medina and not allow it to spread to the other people. It wasn't a physical blockade. Okay, it was through the propaganda. There was some form of metaphysical blockade, whatever you want to call it, right? The people, because they were fed so many lies about Prophet Muhammad and his followers and their mission and this religion, they didn't want to even hear about it. Okay, it reminds me of like 9/11. After 9/11, where some areas, some people, just you being Muslim or anything about Islam, they don't even want to hear about it. Khalas, they have an image stuck, imprinted in their head about Islam, Muslims. That's it. You're terrorists. They don't want to hear it. They don't want any type, any form of discussion. It's very similar, but at a higher level. So, what's the Prophet's job? Just to be a ruler, or his job is guidance?
Guidance of mankind.
So he was commanded by Allah Subhanahu wa Taala to perform this treaty. Okay, and we look what happened after the treaty. The events before the treaty, the Muslims were surrounded in Medina in the Battle of Khandaq by 10,000 troops from all around. And why did these 10,000 troops surround Medina? They weren't all from Mecca. They were from different Arab tribes. They participated in this fight against Prophet Muhammad and his followers because they believed in the propaganda. Okay? So this propaganda had to be broken. How did it break? The Treaty of Hudaybiyah. And then we look what happened after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Islam started to spread like fire. We had about a year and a half later, a little bit more, the conquest of Mecca took place. And the Muslims now marched to Mecca. The last time they had troops and they had an encounter with Ahl Mecca, they had maximum 1,000.
That was during the trench.
During the Battle of the Trench. Now they're marching to Mecca with 10,000. And Quraysh Khatiyya, they didn't have anybody to come out and fight. Abu Sufyan was the first to come and pay allegiance, right?
And if I remember correctly, even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran describes this as Fathan Mubina.
Inna fatahna laka fathan mubina.
A victory, an opening.
So when we look at the commonalities between the two treaties, we see that, okay, Imam Hassan, before he did a treaty, what was the situation? Was there any propaganda going on? Was there what kind of that? So the main event that took place before the treaty was the martyrdom, the shahada of Imam Ali alayhi salam. When the news reaches Ahl Sham, who were at least half of the Muslims at that time in North Africa and Sham, the territories that what's their understanding? What do they feel? What do they think of Imam Ali? They were surprised that he was assassinated in the masjid.
They didn't believe he prayed.
They didn't even believe he prayed. Isn't that a sample of propaganda?
Yes.
So what's Imam Hassan's job?
To expose them to
be the ruler and collect taxes, or to guide people.
No, to guide.
To at least give them access to the truth. All right. So if they want to be guided, they can be guided. So Imam Hassan's treaty was a way to break that blockade and that propaganda and allow Ahl Sham to have access to the Sunnah of the Prophet. Okay, and in other words, to intellectually invade Ahl Sham with the people of Iraq, the followers of Imam Ali.
Because they were exposed to Imam Ali. And this could have only happened if they were in a position of strength. Just like during Hudaybiyah, before that the Prophet had been victorious in the battles,
of truth,
right?
Yeah.
But there was no exposure to Ahl Makkah. But because in Imam Hassan alayhi salam's time, because of the strength of Ahl al-Kufa, what was needed was to expose them to Iraq.
And also to give them access to the Sunnah of the Prophet. Now, let's summarize this, and inshallah in our next gathering we can talk more about the mission of Imam Ali. But basically Imam Hassan is continuing the mission of Imam Ali. And what's the mission of Imam Ali? To revive the Sunnah of the Prophet, because something had happened to it, right? In the time of after the passing of the Prophet.
There's a big gap between the Prophet and the mission.
So the mission of Imam Hassan alayhi salam is continuing the mission of Imam Ali, but reaching it to the people of Ahl Sham. That's how we can summarize the reason behind the treaty of Imam Hassan with Muawiyah.
And just to conclude, the reasons for these lies made about Imam Hassan, are there any reasons that you could provide us within?
Yeah, so let's close with this. Yeah. I think that this is a good discussion today. We'll close. A very good point here is that where did these lies come from? And this negative image of Ahl Kufa. We find that Ahl Kufa they were enemies with Ahl Sham or Bani Umayyah, with the Umayyad dynasty, and also with the Abbasid dynasty. Now, a lot of these history books were written in the time of the Abbasiyin. Okay, so when Abbasiyin in the time of Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, they established their dynasty, their capital in Baghdad. At that time, they ruled from almost China to the Atlantic Ocean.
People who only got the Sunnah of the
their only competitor, or their only issue at the time was not neighboring countries. It was actually Ahl Kufa. The only problems they had was the revolts that would take place by the Kufans, led by the Hassaniyin. So in order to combat them, they fabricated a lot of narrations, defaming the image of Ahl Kufa and of Imam Hassan. So nobody can say,
they are his descendants.
I'm a grandson of Hassan ibn Ali, follow me. They wanted to tarnish his image and tarnish the image of Ahl Kufa. That's the khulasa.
Makes sense.
Inshallah in the future, we're gonna, soon, we're working on courses. They'll be advertised, announced soon, and those will be deep history courses, or we can understand how history was written.
On the Knowledge Seekers platform.
Inshallah.
And then, and I'm really interested to hear more about that exposure of the majority of the Muslim world who had never heard that about the Sunnah of the Prophet through Imam Ali alayhi salam.
Inshallah, that will be our next discussion. Inshallah.
Historic discussion.
Inshallah.
Thank you so much.
It was a beautiful gathering. Inshallah, we'll have many more.
Inshallah. Thank you,
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so
much.
Thank you.
وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الحمد لله.